there, it's Mells with Superficial Gallery, and welcome to episode 19 of 31 Days with the King. This is a short series dedicated to all things Stephen King, with a daily upload on one of his works. So we'll try our best to incorporate his most popular titles, as well as some of the ones that are lesser known or maybe weren't as well received. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with today's pick, which is the first short story collection that I have chosen for this series, and it is Different Seasons. It is probably my second favorite short story collection by Stephen King. It's kind of hard. It might be my first. It might be a tie. I don't know. It's definitely one of my all-time favorite works of Stephen King because it's got 4 amazing stories in here. So let's go ahead and get started with Different Seasons. For the sake of time, what I'm going to do, because the novels or the short stories that are included in this collection are some of my favorite ones overall, forever and ever and ever. And that means I could talk about them forever and ever and ever. And just to save y'all from that headache, what I'll do is I will read the synopsis of each story from the dust jacket. I'll talk a little bit about what the story is about because, again, as always, I will not spoil what happens in these short stories, and then I'll talk about the film adaptations. 3 out of 4 of these do have a film adaptation, okay? So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And one thing to note about these short stories that are in this collection, they are not the typical Stephen King horror trope, okay? They are really human stories. It's stories about everyday life for pretty much, everyday people. Some bad things happen to the people that we talk about in these short stories here, but there's no supernatural, there's no crazy murders or anything spooky like that. So not the typical Stephen King tropes that we know and love him for, really, in this short series collection. So the first one, Hope Springs Eternal, spring there being the season, I'm assuming, or I'm going to go ahead and say that's what that is. And that story is Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. So the most satisfying tale of unjust imprisonment and offbeat escape since the Count of Monte Cristo. This is a very popular story of Stephen King's, and then the adaptation is super popular as well. Basically, this is the story of Andy Dufresne and his life at Shawshank Prison. He is wrongfully convicted of killing his wife and her lover, and then he has to do the time for the crime. At Shawshank, he becomes friends with Red, who's kind of like, that's the guy that you want to be friends with. He can get you things that you need from the outside, things like that. And so he becomes friends with him. He befriends a lot of the staff, the guards at the prison. And he pulls off a pretty phenomenal feat there towards the end of the story. Again, I don't want to spoil anything. The adaptation is probably considered one of the best adaptations of any of Stephen King's works out there. It stars Morgan Freeman and Tim Robbins, among other people, of course. And the story, the film stays pretty true to source material, okay? There are a couple of things that they changed up, but again, and they added a couple of things in, but again, there weren't major plot changes that would make the story really that much different from the adaptation. So obviously, if you haven't checked either one of those out, please do, okay? Because they are amazing short story, amazing adaptation. Moving right along, we have The Summer of Corruption, and The Summer of Corruption is Apt Pupil. Now, a golden California schoolboy and an old man whose hideous past he uncovers enter into a fateful and chilling mutual parasitism. And I want to say the root of that word is parasite, okay? But pardon me, I don't know that word. But I know the story, and if I know the story well enough, I should probably know that it is a dual, meaning, the parasite, it eats away at both of them. So in this story, Todd, who is the young schoolboy that they talk about, he learns that an ex-Nazi, a war criminal, does live in his neighborhood or lives close to him in the same town. And so he basically begins to blackmail him into telling him all about what it was like to be a Nazi, what Germany was like during that time, what World War II was like. And in the process, this really starts to unearth or bring back a lot of the demons for said war criminal, but also starts to mess with the mental stability of Todd. I will leave it at that. The film adaptation of the same name stars Sir Ian McKellen and Brad Renfro. I don't mind the adaptation. I actually enjoyed it. One thing you have to keep in mind, if you've only seen the film version and you haven't read the story, the ending is very, very different. Okay? So I highly suggest that if you haven't read Apt People, that you take the chance to do so, because it is one of the more chilling short stories that I've read by Stephen King, and that says a lot considering there's not any supernatural horror to this story. The material that it's based on, so World War II, Nazi Germany, that whole thing, very scary times for the world, very awful things that were happening. So all of that comes up in the short story, and again, it's definitely one of the more scary short stories that I have read by Stephen King by far. Moving along, Fall from Innocence, fall being your season there. This one, The Body. Four rambunctious young boys venture into the Maine woods and in sunlight and thunder find life, death, and intimations of their own mortality. Okay. Now, The Body. My all-time favorite Stephen King short story. I said it there. The adaptation, Stand By Me, filmed by Rob Reiner. My all-time number one Stephen King film adaptation ever. There, I said it. Now you have it. Now you know. Stand By Me is not only one of my favorite movies ever, but it is my favorite adaptation of a King work. Hands down, by far, tops the scary stuff in my opinion. Will forever, ever be that for me. I could watch this movie every single day, and I would cry every single time. Very well done. I believe King himself has said that it is his favorite adaptation of one of his works, and that when he had went to the screening of Stand By Me, he had to excuse himself because they had really captured the essence of what he was trying to relay in this story so beautifully in the film. It kind of makes me tear up to think about it now. Man. So this story is basically about four friends. They each have their own hardship in their life, to say the least. And they all hear about the body of a missing schoolmate, possibly being down the train tracks a bit a ways. And so they all decide that they're going to take this trek and go find the body. And along the way, they really just develop and flourish into these young men. And the heartwarming part of it is really about what happens when we grow up and we grow out of childhood and we move on from that. Oh, I don't. Okay. I'm going to have to leave it there. Otherwise, I'm going to cry. And I don't want to cry on camera. So the film adaptation, amazing cast. Will Wheaton, River Phoenix, Corey Feldman, Jerry O'Connell, has Kiefer Sutherland in it, John Cusack. Again, if you could only have one food to eat for the rest of my life, that's easy. Pez. Cherry flavor Pez. No question about it. And I'll leave Stand By Me at that. Maybe one day I'll do my own video just about Stand By Me and the body. Okay. Last one, A Winter's Tale. Winter being your keyword there to your season. The Breathing Method. A tale told in a strange club about a woman determined to give birth no matter what. Now, the breathing method. I don't think that many people know about this short story. I think this because anytime I bring it up, because like I said, this is probably tied as my favorite short story collection by Stephen King. Anytime I bring up the breathing method, a lot of people have no idea what I'm talking about. It doesn't have an adaptation. I think I read somewhere once that it might get one soon, or there's a possibility. I don't know much about that. But the breathing method is about a man who gets an invite from his boss to join a very prestigious and kind of hidden, unknown club of distinguished men in New York City. Okay, it's at a brownstone. He goes there, and it's almost like when he steps through the door of that brownstone, he enters into an alternate reality. And this is where tinfoil hat time comes. I feel like this is connected in some way to the Dark Tower. But basically, the gentlemen all gather up. Each one of them take turns telling stories to each other. And in this club, there's a chess set, I believe, that is not actually available in the real world. So there are unpublished literary works in there that have never been heard of. So that's why I say it's like stepping into an alternate reality when you go in there. But for Christmas one year, a doctor decides to give his story about a patient of his. This was the late 50s, early 60s, I believe, that time period. And she gets pregnant out of wedlock. And back in those days, that was very taboo. That was frowned upon, etc. And so the tale is really about his growing relationship with her. And there is a very sad tragedy that happens, but anything to make sure that the baby she's carrying is delivered into the world safely and lives. It is the shortest story in this collection, okay? So it's a really short read, really easy to get through, and I highly suggest that if you have never heard of this, you take the time to read it because it is worth the read. It's intriguing. It brings you in really quickly, so you get through it really quickly. Of course, I wouldn't be me if I didn't show you the picture on the back. So this is Stephen King with his son Owen. So sweet. And we know that he went on to author a book with him, co-author, I should say, Sleeping Beauties. So that's that. I hope you've enjoyed my review of different seasons. Again, I know this is a little bit of a longer review than we're used to, but I think that that's to be expected when we're going into these short stories. So like the video, comment below. Let us know if you've read this short story collection, or you could have read these short stories outside of the collection on their own. I know they're available that way as well. Let us know what you think of the stories. Let us know if you've seen those film adaptations and how you feel about those. Make sure you subscribe to Super Official Gallery. Hit the bell to get notified when new content is published. And we're taking requests, so comment that below if you'd like to have one of your favorite works covered on the show. Tweet us at MellsBells84. And with that, thank you again, and I'll be back to haunt y'all tomorrow. Bye. Aww.